Now that we've developed a solid understanding of what strategic thinking is, being able to think several steps ahead and make decisions now that will benefit the long term, and different types of thinking we can use critical thinking, innovative thinking, intuitive thinking, implementation thinking. Now we're ready to dig into exactly how we can think strategically. In this lesson, we will review both established best practices as well as some newer approaches to strategic thinking. In each of these approaches, you will notice they combine all of the types of thinking we reviewed in the last section. Combining different types of thinking is a key element of strategic problem solving and strategic planning. At the end of this section, you will be able to understand the synectic method and how it has shaped strategic thinking, be able to identify the type of thinking you are naturally drawn to, apply techniques like the 6 thinking hats to facilitate more impactful meetings, and know how to use parallel thinking to reach solutions and build consensus. Let's get started. George Prince and William J.J. Gordon recorded focuses on 4 different types of thinkers or 4 different types of thinking. Each of us is capable of all of these types, but there's usually 1 or 2 that we're naturally drawn toward. The way to identify which one you are naturally is to think about which one of these thinking styles gives you a sense of excitement versus boredom or dread. We'll go through each of these types of thinking in the next few slides. One easy way to understand these thinking styles is to imagine 4 friends, and let's say in this example they're getting ready to go to a costume party, and they want to all dress as a kind of a group costume. Ready? So the first friend starts shouting out ideas. Characters from the Friends TV show, Sex and the City characters, Major Emotions, The 4 Directions of the Compass, 4 Seasons, Harry Potter characters. They go on and on and on. They seem to have more ideas the longer they brainstorm. These are prolific thinkers. The prolific thinker uses a process called abstraction and can be the jumping off point for the compressed conflict idea. The prolific thinker is one of the most crucial thinkers, and often one discounted by teammates. The prolific thinker is the person who's able to come up with a vast array of ideas in different areas and using different resources. These ideas may deal with separate areas of the patient journey or focus on unique stakeholders. The prolific thinker is all about volume. They use free association to rapidly explore connections, and being around them can feel like being part of an improv act. Their ideas are often discounted as poorly thought through or unrealistic, and they usually are. The power of the prolific thinker is to provide the raw materials for other types of thinkers. Stifle the prolific thinker, and you lose one of the greatest sources of inspiration and creativity. The way to manage a prolific thinker is to give them plenty of time and room to dream and imagine in the meeting, and pair them with another type of thinker, the selective thinker. The selective thinker is the second type of thinker in our group, and in our example of the friends getting ready for a costume party, they are going to be able to listen to all of the ideas the prolific thinker came up with, and then hear something they like and say, wait, the 4 seasons, that's a great one. What if we go as the 4 seasons? We're also different. It would be fun to play on that and all go as different seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. The selective thinker is critical to pull out the idea of the prolific thinker from all the vast ideas that the prolific thinker is coming up with. The selective thinker may not come up with a lot of ideas, but they're brilliant at choosing the right one to pursue. The selective thinker sometimes gets the reputation of being too critical or too quiet, but in reality, selective thinkers are great at using and recognizing analogy as a way of solving a problem. Understanding which ideas are the most likely to relate and reflect the challenge the group is dealing with is the special gift of the selector. The third friend in the group listens to the selector talk about the 4 seasons and builds on the idea. How about if we're the 4 sports seasons? For spring, one of us could dress as a baseball player. For summer, one of us could dress as a golfer. For fall, one of us could dress as a football player. And for winter, one of us could dress as a basketball player. This third friend is a builder. Builders make an assessment of the idea selected and determine how it could be improved and enhanced. They add important details to strengthen the idea and make it more effective. Builders need good ideas upon which to build, and they can sometimes be criticized as riding on the shirt tails of others who come up with original ideas. But the special skill of the builder should not be discounted or discouraged. The builder is important in the development of a new idea and solution, because without their contribution, ideas would not be fully developed. The last type of thinker is our last friend, who says, it's going to be cold out, so instead of a basketball player for winter, let's go as a hockey player. I know we're a place where we can get used in discounted sports uniforms. Let's go talk about when we could go try on some options. This last friend is the driver, the person who takes the idea as it is built and adapts it for implementation. They note the tasks that have to happen to put the idea into action. They note the gaps or the weaknesses of an idea and make adjustments to make it more implementable. Without the drivers, the important work of adapting the idea for the real world just wouldn't happen. Often this means the idea is abandoned as not realistic or too expensive. But with a driver, you can bring this idea to life. The driver is sometimes put down as too tactical in common brainstorming sessions, which is a shame. There's a need for drivers to help bring ideas into the real world and ensure they are executed correctly. Using synectics and these 4 types of thinking styles, you can generate ideas that are inventive, well thought through, and ready to be implemented. Not bad for a strategic planning session. It's also a great way to get everybody involved in the session when you're having a brainstorming session around a specific problem. Each one can play a different type of thinker based on what they're more naturally inclined towards. Most people, when presented with these 4 different types of thinking, know almost intuitively where they prefer to play. Hopefully this will help you create strategic planning sessions that are exciting and fruitful. Another approach to strategic thinking is called systems thinking. This approach encourages viewing the problem and its attributes as part of an interconnected system. Now, there are 6 tools that you use in systems thinking. Each are areas of deeper examination. So we'll go through these in more depth in our next lesson. But in brief, the 6 tools are part versus whole. Like the puzzle piece shown here, most parts fit into a larger system. Knowing how the parts fit together into the whole is often more important than focusing on one part. Systems thinking usually starts with stepping back and seeing how the one element of the system is fitting into the overall system. The next tool is to look at both linear and nonlinear processes. This is also true of structured and unstructured data. You can learn a lot from structured and linear data. Spreadsheets and trend lines can tell you a great deal. However, most systems don't work in a linear fashion all the time, even when they're designed that way. To better understand what is happening, sometimes you have to look at the steps in the process and how they interrelate. What happens when one part of the system breaks down, like maybe when your copywriter is sick or on a pitch, for example? Who steps in? Don't be afraid to go and talk to people and look through the written feedback to find out what's going on. Oftentimes, these sources will provide richer insights than the hard data. Once you're looking at data, it's important to select how you treat it. That's the third tool. Analysis is the process of breaking one idea into little smaller chunks, like you see here on the slide. This works for a lot of solutions, and it's often necessary. But sometimes you need to synthesize, which you take the smaller parts and pull them into a whole, and that gives you a clearer picture of what's happening. Joining together data or information from several sources can give you that kind of fuller picture of what's happening. Looking at the entire process versus separate silos or structures is another tool. That's the image that you see below the puzzle pieces. You have the one process that's an entire system in all the buildings, and then they also have all these cogs and wheels on the side. Sometimes you need to look at the structure as a whole, and sometimes you need to break down the processes into different parts so that you can see how the system's operating in different areas and how those affect the outcome. Another in the center here on the bottom is this idea of hierarchy versus networks. So networks exist, and how information flows through a system is a really powerful strategic tool. If you know how the information is shared and what formal and informal networks exist, you can more easily pinpoint the bottleneck. So a strong, formal network is the hierarchies that sometimes seem to exist. So-and-so is the boss of these other people, and they report to this person. But sometimes information flows informally throughout a kind of a team network. And so sometimes when you dig into the network point of view, you see there are actually multiple streams of information. So this type of perspective is particularly helpful in building relationships with your clients. You may think that your client reports to the vice president, but then you learn that they're very good friends with the division executive and worked as partners at another company. That kind of network influences, that's critical to understand how decisions are made and how things get done. Now keep in mind, sometimes it's useful to identify and map the formal hierarchy connections first and then map out the network. And the last tool, the system thinking, focuses on relationships versus results. Now, results will naturally flow from a well-run system. Relationships, however, may interrupt the process or reframe the results. The relationships between different points in the system are important to understand. Now, for pharma brands, there's a complex relationship between the brand marketer, who has hired your agency, and the internal marketing operations team, who seek to build consistency among all brands' advertising. Knowing how these relationships affect results is critical to managing your campaign strategically and helping your client find success within their system. Parallel thinking is another type of thinking approach, and it's one around solving problems by encouraging debate. And the reason that this is so special, and many of you have probably heard of this or even experienced it, is because it allows people to almost have a combative debate situation in a way that's constructive. So it removes some of the ego that's sometimes engaged in the combative nature of a natural debate. So lateral thinking is all about solving problems through this indirect kind of creative approach. And so the 6 thinking hats that Edward de Bono created was all around understanding how different types of thinking could be presented. So when you think about lateral thinking, you're wanting to focus on what could be. So you're kind of brainstorming, but you're wanting to really think specifically about what could be and kind of building that world. And then when you take a look at the different approach to a challenge, you'll want to set the stage by helping people understand that there are different types of colors for different hats that you would wear. And we'll go through each one of these colors. But the colors helps people think about the type of information and the kind of engagement that they want to give in the meeting. First color is white, and that is just for facts and information. So somebody who might be wearing, and I can put wearing in quote marks, or you can actually have a little white card, or that you want to play a white card, or you want to have actually a white hat. But the person that's wearing this hat or playing this card is really focusing on what's defined and known. What information do we have? What information do we need? What's the data telling us? And this kind of this person keeps the whole conversation grounded in reality. The blue hat is all about planning and processes. So the person that's wearing this hat or playing this card is focusing on how implementable the ideas are and how could we really bring that to the market or to life. It would fit within the timeline. Do we have to update the process? That's somebody that's really thinking with their blue hat on. Somebody who's thinking with their red hat or playing the red card, they're very emotional. They're really going off intuition. So somebody maybe has this kind of gut instinct that we talked about, instinctual thinking, and sometimes that's downplayed or discouraged in a group conversation. It doesn't have enough credibility. But having the 6 thinking hats allows someone to be able to say, I'm just going to go with my gut here. I'm going to wear my red hat for a minute, or I'm going to play my red card, and I'm going to really kind of talk about this particular situation, how this is making me feel. It can also really help when the debate is getting heated. So if you have people in the same conversation and they may not be getting along, the 6 thinking hats can help people talk through their issues. So the red card or the red hat could be used to say things like, I feel you aren't hearing me. It gives kind of a safety valve for the conversation. It gives the permission of the person to go with their heart or with their gut and drive the conversation forward. The green hat is the idea generator. So the green hat is sometimes what the prolific thinker that we talked about in our first example with synectics, they might be wearing the green hat a lot. In fact, you may need to ask them to take it off after a while and let people discuss the ideas they've come up with. But this green hat person is coming up with possibilities on how to solve the problem. And the real point here is that when you're in this green hat thinking stage, you're not editing. You're not trying to say, oh, that doesn't work or that won't work or judging. You're just simply coming up with as many new ideas as possible. And then there's the yellow hat. This is the, maybe this will work. What if we could build on it? Kind of growing the idea and thinking about the benefits and what the positive parts of the idea are. Its opposite is the black hat and the pessimist and the judgment. Sometimes this is really important in managing risks and pressure testing solutions. Now, sometimes, cost could be an issue, so that sometimes comes up with the black hat, but this is really an important one. Now, sometimes you have to ask people to take off the black hat because particularly in the compliance and medical area, they sometimes have a lot of concerns about different ideas and they're uncomfortable brainstorming because they might be wearing the black hat or playing the black card too often. So when we think about how you put this 6 thinking hats into action, the first step is really kind of creating something that allows people to indicate what color they're using. And we mentioned, cards or colored hats. And colored cards are pretty easy, and people are sometimes more comfortable playing a card than they are wearing a hat. So the colored cards sometimes allows people to each have their own set. So they aren't reaching for hats. They each have their own set of cards, so it's pretty inexpensive. And you can have 2 people that are playing the same card at the same time. And that could also help you understand the group. So if a group's getting really excited about an idea, maybe everybody's holding on to their yellow card and talking about how great it is. And you may need to ask someone to think about picking up a black card and giving us some of the opposite perspectives. So it's a great way to kind of manage the conversation as well. You can, kind of have these, people kind of holding their cards up or placing the cards in front of them that they're playing. And then you can also take notes in the colors of the card that somebody's playing. So every time somebody says something that you want to make note on the flip chart, you're doing it in the color of the card that they just laid down. So that's kind of that way you can start to kind of see, not only for note-taking purposes, but also in the course of the conversation, like, oh, well, we've had a lot of green writing here. We've come up with a lot of great ideas. Maybe it's time that we go to a different, color and start evaluating some of the ideas. Or maybe we need to go to blue and think about building on these ideas. So there's usually some kind of different things that you can pull together there. So that kind of gives you an idea of how to use the, the 6 thinking hats, the synectics, lateral thinking, and different types of, types of thinking and approaches to thinking to really get to a good solution. I hope this is helpful as you start to think about how you're going to spur the development of strong strategic ideas. In the next section, we're going to talk about how to build these ideas and concepts into a plan. See you in the next section.